This is a conversation with me, Ritu Bansal, an IACA author series started this year to highlight many achievements of South Asian authors in Atlanta community. You can find this and previous interviews on Facebook at IACA ATL. Let me introduce my new guest. Sucheta Rawal is an award-winning food and travel writer, author, and philanthropist. She founded the charity Go Eat Give that promotes cultural awareness through food and travel. A native Atlantan, she has been featured on the New York Times Travel, Travel+Leisure, Foodor's, Cuisine Noir, cover, and other publications. Sucheta is well known in the children's book circuit for her series, Beato Goes To. She writes on Mugwort. You can find more about her work on her website, www.suchetarawal.com, and follow her on Twitter at Sucheta Rawal. Her books can be purchased on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Welcome, Sucheta.
Thank you, Ritu. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. You grew up in a very diverse family, religiously and different parts of the country. You came to the US very young to pursue education. Tell me a little bit about you. You have a very interesting story to tell.
Yeah, I grew up in northern India in a city called Chandigarh. And what you said about religious background, my mother is Christian, my dad was Hindu, my grandfather was Muslim, and my stepmother was Sikh. So I decided to pursue and learn more about Buddhism. And growing up with all these different religions exposed me to a lot of philosophies. And that meant that we celebrated every festival, Diwali, Christmas, Eid. Everything was a big deal in our house. I always grew up learning the prayers in all different religions and going to places of worship with them and understanding that everything is so aligned in terms of the philosophy of religions. And that's probably what compelled me to go travel around the world and learn more about people and understand that everywhere people are just the same and they want the same things from life.
Yeah, I mean, you really covered every religion in your house, more or less.
No Jewish people.
Well, but yeah, you got a lot of good festival food to eat for sure, especially with Bali around the corner. You said that when you came to America, you went to school, you had a job, like you were working. So how did you become a hypothetical travel desk?
So when I moved to the US, it exposed me to a lot of different cuisines first. And especially being in Atlanta back in mid 90s, coming from India, which didn't have a lot of culinary diversity at that time. You know, growing up in India was like you go to a restaurant, it's Indian or it's continental, which is like everything else.
Yes.
But then you come here to Atlanta and just on one street, you can find Greek, Thai, Italian, Malaysian, all these different cuisines. So my first 6 months in Atlanta, I gained 30 pounds. It was all about, I need to learn more about all these different cultures through the food. And then after the food exposed me to the travel as well. I wanted to learn how do people actually cook back home in these countries. So I would travel to Italy, take a cooking class, go stay on a farm, go shop in the local markets, and really understand, the Italian food you get in Italy is very different from what you find here.
Yeah.
And I did this as a working professional. So this was just a hobby. I was working in investment banking at the time, and it allowed me the luxury to travel maybe once a quarter. And I made enough money to support that. So
I think that's needed, right?
that's two things that you need. But even 4 weeks out of the year is not enough. With the world is so large and there's so much to see. But I was doing that. I made sure I did it at least 4 times a year. And my colleagues would come to me and say, well, we want to travel somewhere. Could you help us plan a trip, or could you forward us your itinerary? And trust me, Ritu, Friday nights, I would get so many calls, people asking, where should I go to eat? I have in-laws coming in town, or it's a special birthday, or I'm looking for the best a certain kind of cuisine in certain part of town. So that's where a friend suggested, well, why don't you just start a blog? Because your phone rings all the time. People are calling you, emailing you, asking for suggestions for food and travel. And that's why I started the blog called Go
Yeah.
Eat Give.
Oh, wow. That's a cool story. That is actually, yeah. Oh, that's so much fun because you remind me that people ask me all the time, where should we go here? Which restaurant? So yeah, I love those informations. So when you travel, something that I've been in my research, I found that you do not just travel typical. You don't go to places. Well, you have gone to 90 countries, correct? This is
Uh, yeah, I'm close to 100 now.
Oh man, oh wow. And so, but you don't just go and you do an exploratory style of traveling. Plain-
Exactly. I felt in the beginning when I was traveling, it was just like any other tourist where you would stay in a hotel, you'll eat at the restaurants that you found in the guidebook, and then you would take a tour with a local bus tour or a hop on, hop off tour. And after doing that a few times, I felt like it was getting very repetitive. And it
Mhm,
was having the same exact experience over and over again in a different country.
mhm.
And I would come back with the exact same photos as everybody else who had been there.
Yeah.
And it just felt like I was seeing uh, one side of the country, but not really the full picture.
Mhm,
And that's when I started doing something called volunteer travel, where I would not just go as a visitor, but actually help with the community. And it still involves staying in a hotel or in a guest house. We would still go to and see attractions, but it would be through the local perspective. We'll always be working with a staff locally and have a chef come out, make home cooked meals, and the staff would actually take us on excursions to places they like to go to. And it wasn't always a lens that tourists see the country through. And I found that that added more meaning to my travels. And now, like you said, almost 100 country years later, I always seek out more meaningful opportunities. So not always volunteering in the community, but at least looking for those sustainable ways to travel, where you're staying in a boutique hotel that's run by locals, eating at restaurants that where the locals go to eat, but not necessarily popular in the guidebooks, and having some sort of experiences that exposes you to the culture more.
Wow. Yeah, that's and you do find a lot of intriguing dishes and foods that you never see other way, right? Because everybody is focusing for the tourist, truly.
Right. And also the different styles of cooking.
Mhm,
You would relate to that if you've been to India. And the when the tourists come to India, they're eating at the restaurants and hotels, and they're same exact menus at every single restaurant. And everything is made with cream and butter and coloring. You get the naans and heavy breads, but that's not how you eat at home. So
yeah,
you go to Indian household, you had a very different flavor and very different dishes, and you eat mostly vegetarian food, and it's so much healthier. So
yeah.
I try to do that whenever I'm traveling. I try to go to somebody's house to eat the local cuisine, and so I can also tell the difference.
How do you find that though? Like, how do you find a family to just go and say, hey, I want to be hanging out with your family and I want to try what you make?
So that's a good question. A lot of it is just through network. Social media. I post on social media, I'm coming to a certain destination. Do I know anybody from there? A friend from there? And that's how people introduce me.
Oh,
And, people are generally very receptive to meeting someone new. And that way, I'll show my interest in food and they'll be like, okay, I will cook something for you. The other thing I've tried is Airbnb experiences
oh, okay.
and cook local, eat local. There are like few websites that also have home hosted dinners, and you can book it through the site. You pay something. I actually host dinners now at my house because when I was traveling and doing those, people seem to be interested in doing it here in the US.
Wow, I did not know that. That's actually a very cool idea. Yeah, it's like uh, those big dinner parties that you hear that people in Atlanta are throwing. It's like an underground way of eating, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of that concept. That is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that concept, but it's not like that formal and it's not that big. So it's generally one-on-one. You get to talk to a person and meet with them. Sometimes I have one person come over, sometimes it's nine. So it's never really planned that way.
Huh, that's good. So, where was the first country you visited?
The first country was to come to the United States when I was 16.
Oh,
But that was, yeah, it was not really vacation. It was kind of vacation, but also visiting family and friends. The first place I really wanted to visit was France.
mhm.
So my husband and I, we made a stop on our way back from our wedding, which happened in India, and we did a layover in Paris for a couple of days because that's what all we could afford at that time.
Yeah, it's expensive.
And yeah, but we had a great time. It was, we did all the very budget tourist friendly things.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, I think that is one of the best ways to, those memories are one of the best you make, though, right? So you travel a lot by yourself too, right? And as a woman traveling to certain places where you know there's a gender hierarchy, how do you manage to keep safe and still explore the parts unknown?
That's a good question. A lot of people ask me about that, like, how do you feel safe being a woman, a solo woman traveler? I think the first thing for me is to respect the culture, to understand the differences and make a note of them. And
Mhm,
rather than being judgmental about it, try to blend in.
mhm.
And I've seen that even with travelers who come to the US, to India, or who go to the Middle East, they say, why? Why are the women wearing certain clothes? Or why are they having these gender differences? So I don't really question that, but I try to understand their perspective. And this is a very old culture. So
Mhm.
I'm not there for a short time to come and change it. But the way I can protect myself is by blending in. So I dress according to the local customs. And if it requires me to have my arms and legs covered, I would rather go be more on the conservative side than try to be look like a tourist.
Yeah, yeah.
And even the ways I carry myself is more like how a local would. And I think we also have the advantage of our skin color. We can pretty much get,
Well,
unnoticed in a lot of different cultures. And
yeah,
that tends to work in my favor too.
yeah. Do you get a lot that, oh, are you like, I get this when I traveled, I think, to some of the South European countries where you people just think you are the local because of this color of your skin, which is
Yeah.
cool.
All of South America, Central America, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and parts of Northern Africa and Southern Europe. So yeah, pretty much most of the
Of
world.
the world, yeah, you can just go and they'll think you're part of them. That's absolutely, yeah, that was so when you say like going, and I think you also travel during when things are politically unsafe, right? But you've gone there.
Mhm.
How do you feel it's okay to go, especially as a woman going there when people are like, no, the Arab Spring happened and there's this riot happening and we should not be there. I mean, a lot of people normally will not go, but you have stepped in there and been there.
I have, and I have noticed that what you hear about the country in the media is not always the true picture of what's actually happening on ground.
Mhm.
And that's been the case for most places I've been to. Like Cuba, I had all these stories about Cuba that people are impoverished and they're unhappy and there's rebels all the time. And when I was there, I felt people were so happy and welcoming. And even though they didn't have a lot of means, but they looked at each other, their neighbors, as their equals. So they were all in this together.
Mhm.
And everywhere you went in Cuba, they were like dancing and music, and there's no crime at all. People hitchhike to get across in the cities.
Oh, wow.
And I saw teenagers standing on a Saturday night at midnight. And normally here, if I go in inner city Atlanta, I'll be a little worried. There are these 100 teenagers standing around, but they were nobody was on their cell phones because they didn't have internet, and nobody was drinking, nobody was smoking. They were just standing around and talking, and there was no crime. So
Wow.
I felt like, nobody really talks about that part of Cuba in that certain way. And similarly in Israel, to your point, I was in Jerusalem,
Mhm.
where there's certain parts of Jerusalem where they say tourists should not go there. There can be a bombing at any time. This can happen. Same thing with Kashmir.
Yeah.
People talk about, Kashmir is not safe. I went with another female friend of mine. I feel more safe there than I do in New Delhi. And
Yeah.
people just were super friendly. I did ask them about the safety situation, and they said that generally, when that happens, it's between the militia, and it's never to attack the tourists or civilians. Yes, civilian could come on the way if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, but that can be in New York City. It can be
Yeah.
anywhere in the world.
Yeah, you're right about that, 100%. Um, so how do you choose where you go? It's like throwing a dart on a map, or there's a more planned process to this?
It's a bit of both. So I do want to visit most countries in the world,
Mhm.
and I start off with the basic list each year of the places that are calling me the most, maybe some festivals I've heard about or foods I'm interested in trying.
Mhm.
Don't always work out, like 2020.
Yeah.
I had like 10 trips canceled last year, and hope to make it there at some point. I don't think it's going to happen right away because those countries have suffered so much too in the tourism. So I have a plan for next year, but we'll see.
Let's see how it goes. Okay. So now you've at 100, so you've really covered most of Europe and most of South Africa, and now you're like kind of in the which hemisphere are you on at this point?
So I've covered most of Europe and South America. I haven't covered a lot in Central Africa. So I'd like to go there. And I was supposed to go to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos when the pandemic happened. So that is another part of Asia I'd like to go back to hopefully next year. And then in Central Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, there are like a lot of Africa has so many countries, to explore. But yeah, Europe and South America, I think I've covered pretty much everything.
Do you feel like you have a language barrier because you speak Hindi, I'm assuming you speak English, but then there are other languages that in certain places, I mean, I guess you can get away with English in a lot of places, but I mean, amount of that you've traveled, I bet you ran into places where you like a huge, huge problem with language.
Yeah, I do speak some Spanish and Italian, but there have been places like in Russia, where I was volunteering in a small town where there's no one spoke English. Even the restaurant menus were not in English. And it was times where I would go to order my food and I had to be like, swim something with in the seafood, just make gestures to get something. And this was before I had a Google translator.
Mhm.
So you couldn't just go in and speak something aloud. But there have been times like that where I couldn't. It was you using all your other senses to communicate, and I think that's the most fun of travel. And I've been in parts of Japan too, where there was nobody spoke
Yeah.
English, and my Japanese is like 5 words. And I asked my waiter where I was having dinner, where is this garden? I showed him a photo, and there was a particular garden which was in bloom there. And we spoke to a translator and he said, I'll take you there tomorrow, meet me after my shift. And, we are just communicating with the phone translators. And then sure enough, he showed me around the town next day.
Wow, that's so cool. So for people, you also say that you do, for people who like all inclusive, you do not like them, right? You do not stay in those. Um, you're looking for meaningful. How do you find, I know you said you find families and places to stay, but like when you're going to certain places that are smaller and that is the whole industry is tourism and they're only like, especially Cancun, that whole strip of Playa Carmen, and they're all hotels.
Mhm.
How do you go and find people who are local, who are actually working in the tourist industry and want you to be in those hotels?
No, so I do stay in hotels, Ritu, but I look for hotels that are run more sustainably. So I try to go to the website and see, how do they give back,
Yeah.
whether they have an environmental impact or they're employing only from the local community or they're helping educate the locals, propel them in some way. Like even a place like London,
Mhm.
there is a hotel called the Good Hotel, and it's a beautiful hotel on the water, but they hire people who have come out of the prison system
Okay.
and train them in the hospitality industry so they can go back out there and get jobs. And it's it's like any other nice boutique hotel. And they
Mhm.
have one in Guatemala I stayed at. And same thing in Mexico, all over Mexico. There are so many these beautiful boutique hotels. Like in Baja, there's one called Encuentero, and
Mhm.
it's set up in this mountains in the vineyards. So it's kind of like Napa Valley style,
Mhm.
but it's owned by a local family. And they have individual cabins, and everything is fully sustainable in terms of the climate impact of it. So those are the kind of things that you need to be a little more conscious about. If you stay in just another 500-room resort,
Yeah.
that's fine as long as are they hiring the locals or is the money all going towards a major corporation that's sitting in New York City?
Yeah. But it's to find like what you're saying, those little boutique hotels, they don't advertise in every single website.
Yeah.
You are really searching them, like, and how do people who do not have the media, the understanding of it, who are basically looking at Travelocity, Orbits, um, you know, how do they find those little boutique hotels?
So first of all, I'm strictly against booking flights, hotels, anything from third party vendor sites, consolidation sites.
Okay.
Because first of all, they don't present you, like you said, the most authentic hotels that are out there. And secondly, they take up so much of the middleman fees that the hotel itself doesn't get everything that you're paying for it. So it's like it's a lose lose for everybody. What I like to do is sometimes use them as more of a search engine and then go book it directly with the hotel through the hotel website. So you just cut out the middleman. But
Wow.
I do my research by reading. So reading blogs, articles, just going on more of a hyper local sites.
Okay.
So like say you're going to Cancun, go to the Visit Cancun page, which is more of written by their local destination. So this is like their tourism department has put together the list of all the businesses that are in the area. And sometimes, they are members of their chamber, and so they're trying to promote them. But that's a good resource because it's more comprehensive of everything that is available to you. And not just hotels in terms of tour guides, attractions, restaurants. You can find like all different levels of budgets in there too.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great information to share, because not mostly people just, go on Google and the first thing that pops up. Um, how did you metamorph from blog writer to a writer?
Yeah, so actually, I started off as a writer and then became a blogger. So while I was
Wow.
in my corporate job, I was writing for a new magazine called Rivaj,
Mm.
doing food reviews for them.
Oh, okay.
And then I started writing for Khabar, which is based right here in Atlanta, and Flavors magazine,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
all about food. So I was just writing for them on over the weekends, and it was just meant to be as a hobby because I had a full-time job. But it was much later on where my writing, my personal experiences, like I told you, everybody was calling me and asking for references. That's when I started writing the blog as more of my own personal experiences and my data dump. So even now, my blog is maybe like 1% of the writing that I do.
Oh,
And most of it is around writing for magazines and newspapers.
wow. So it's the other way around. So sorry, I got that. And so, and now that you are a author, are you more, did you have a career shift? Are you still have your day job or you are now a full-time author?
So about 10 years ago, I quit my day job
Mhm.
and I've been a full-time writer since then.
Wow. Wow. That's cool. That is really cool. Um, you said food connects us to different cultures. US is, of course, very diverse with diverse cuisines. Locally, we have Buford Highway that people rave about. Unlike as anything in Atlanta, apart from the Greek church and the Greek festival, and then we'll have the Jewish festival at the temple. Um, Not the Jewish temple. What is your favorite spot on Buford Highway, or your favorite place to go try? I know it's putting you on a like a smaller lens of what you like, because you do like a lot more. And how does that strip of road really connect us to the world?
That's Buford Highway is amazing. I don't know what Atlanta would look like without that. And every time I drive there, I have like a list of I gotta come back here, 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 because
Yeah.
it's like a window to the world. You know,
Yeah.
you keep discovering new and new places.
Mhm.
And I don't know, sometimes I've even been there and been to 5 different restaurants in one day because my list keeps growing. So right now, my favorite there is it's a hole in the wall Malaysian restaurant called Mamak.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You've been there?
Yes, it's really good.
And across the street from it is a dessert place called Mango Mango. And they do all these different fruit-based desserts. So it's like mango, durian, more like tropical
Yeah.
kinds of fruits, but they do the millefleur layer cakes. They make their own ice creams and they put big pieces of fruits in there. So it's generally like, those are my two must stops when I'm there.
Okay. Good.
And
That's
then Sweetheart Bakery, which is right next to Mamak, is also amazing. I found out about a new Indonesian restaurant around there. It's called Warung.
good.
So that's another new place that I'm liking.
And that place is just like Mecca. I love that place so much. It's like, you know, but we go on the weekends. It's just to travel on the weekend. So I eat a lot of vegetarian, and when I travel too, I try to always eat vegetarian based on the fact that I always think, if you cannot make vegetarian, how can you be a great chef, right? That's the key. And growing up in India, similarly to you, that was our primary meal. Um, it is very hard for vegetarians to find anything but bread and French fries in a lot of countries. How do you find vegetarian meals in countries where meat is a primary source of food and also cheaper than vegetarian food?
It's hard, trust me. And I don't eat a lot of meat. I will taste something for my work, but I will never go into a restaurant and prefer to order a meat dish.
Mhm.
So I'll tell you an example of when I was visiting Mongolia,
Mhm.
which was very heavy meat-based diet.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to take a chance because I'm also, if I do eat meat, I have it's generally poultry or seafood, and it also I'd like to know like it's sustainably sourced. So I told them I'm vegetarian in Mongolia. And so I would just give them this heads up before I even entered a restaurant or stayed at a hotel. And they did a vegetarian version of all their traditional dishes.
Wow.
The dumplings they have and the cheese breads and everything that they noodles, soups, they would do a vegetarian version of it. And so it is possible. But
Okay.
if you don't ask for it, they would assume that you want to eat just the way they do.
Mhm.
And since their main food is camel milk and horse sausages and a lot of beef with fat on it,
Mhm.
which may not be appealing to you, but that's how they eat. So unless you just want the raw, authentic experience, just ask for it. Another example was when I was in Russia.
Mhm.
One of the girls who was in my trip, she was vegan, and I didn't know of Russian food that doesn't include meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
So we had completely vegetarian Russian authentic meals with starting from a veggie borscht soup to mushroom pierogies to some nice vegetarian entrees with potatoes and rice and beautiful desserts.
Mhm.
And I felt like, I didn't even know Russian food was possible in a vegetarian format. So you'll be surprised. Just ask for it.
Oh, that's cool. Because I've been there and we were like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. It's difficult. And my nephew just stuck to chicken McNuggets at McDonald's. I had to cry.
Where was this?
This is in Moscow.
Oh, really?
But we loved it. We just loved Moscow. I know people get surprised, but it's such a beautiful city and people are really nice. Um, on your site, you also said that people, and you just said verbally too, that people are same everywhere. In the era of difference created by social media and political parties all over the world, how do you see your travel style influence positivity?
Great question. I think it's going both ways. When we travel, we are an ambassador of the culture that we represent. And for me, that's being both Asian and American.
Mhm.
And when I meet somebody from a different country and in their culture, they are representing their culture. So it's like we are bringing the best of ourselves to each other. And I feel like people are generally want to portray a positive image of their country.
Mhm.
And everywhere I go, it for the most part, it's always been very kind and hospitable and making me feel welcomed. So I have a good image to take back. And the same onus rel- is on us as travelers, instead of being demanding or, oh, this is not according to how I live or how what I would expect. We have to appreciate how people live and what they believe in and how they follow their culture. Understand that there's certain differences on the surface, but once you sit down and have a dinner, break bread together, we all love to eat.
Yeah,
We At the end of the day, we all talk about our families or
yeah,
our loved ones or careers, and we want the same things in life. We all want to be happy, be loved, have enough money to support our families, and have peace in some form around us. So once you spend enough time getting to know another person, I feel like you do look past what they are wearing or how they look or how they behave. And that's been the most important learning for me during my travels.
Mhm.
Because I feel like if I was just sitting here in my house in Atlanta and maybe watching movies or reading the news, I would not immerse myself in another culture as much as I'm able to do it when I'm there.
So let's talk about your book. You have a beautifully illustrated books, children's series with Beato Goes To, and that's the title. While doing some research on you, I noticed Beato is a very popular cat. Why did you choose a cat to be the storyteller?
Yeah, so he's my real cat who lives right here in Smyrna, very close to you. And while I was creating this series of children's books, I didn't want to put a person as the main character
Mhm,
because when you see a person, you immediately gravitate towards bucket them in a certain category.
mhm,
So whether it's the color of their skin or their facial features or it's a gender, based on that, you will have certain images around it. So
mhm,
I didn't want to do that. A cat has no demography.
mhm.
He's
Yeah.
just curious cats.
Uh-huh.
He blends in wherever he goes. He just likes to learn about different cultures, and he can be anywhere in the world, and nobody will know where he's from.
Mhm.
So that was the philosophy of doing the cat, and plus it's cute. Kids love a
Yeah.
talking cat.
And how many books do you have at this point?
I've written 5 so far. So they are Beato Goes to Greenland, Israel, Indonesia, Japan, and Brazil.
Cool. So you have a very heartwarming story about your first book, Beato Goes to Greenland. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so that was the book that actually inspired this whole series, Beato Goes to Greenland. And this is when I was visiting Greenland, a very remote part of Greenland, where I stayed on a sheep farm with a couple who just started this guest house. And they were living in the main house. They had another 2-bedroom um, house constructed on their sheep farm. They had 200 sheep, 2 dogs, chickens, and 1 daughter. And the daughter was about 7 at the time. Her name is Ina. And
Mhm,
this young couple, they were French Greenlandic. They were hosting me and my husband there where we stayed. But the 7-year-old girl, Ina, she was playing a bigger host to me. And to a point where she would take us on hikes and we would have picnics. She will show me around the farms. We will go to the glaciers and we will lick off the ice together
wow.
and we would roll in the meadows. So this was like, I was very inspired that how does a 7-year-old who has no school nearby, their nearest neighbor is 40 minutes by boat, and I mean boat going through glaciers,
Mhm,
and she has no television, no cell phone, no internet, completely disconnected from the world. Yet she speaks 5 languages and she's able to communicate with complete strangers and be a welcoming host to us. And I felt like if kids like are living like that in certain parts of the world, and then you have kids living in other parts who have everything but are not able to communicate to each other,
mhm,
their story needs to be told in some way. So
mhm,
that's where I got inspired to write Ina's story. And those are actual photographs that you see in the book
mhm.
of where I was, how she dressed and looked like at the time. She wore pink from head to toe. That was her color. And those were her actual dogs that you see in the pictures. And so it's all inspired based on true events and people.
And you had to take permission from them when you put them in a book?
I did, and I sent her a book
Mhm,
once it was published. I didn't tell her. I'd spoken to her mom about it, and I wanted to see what her reaction would be to, for this little child to see herself in a book. And I asked her mom when they received the book, and from, going from US to Greenland, it takes like 3 months.
right.
When she did open the book, she started crying. And
Um,
that was not because she saw her own picture. It's because she saw her dogs who had been put down since then.
oh
They
my.
had been bitten by a fox, and so they had to be put down. So she saw the photos of the dogs, and that's what made her cry.
Oh, that's such a beautiful story. And that's actually, yeah, that's moving, very moving. And Beato Goes to Brazil came out a different way. So let's talk about that one.
Yeah, so Brazil came out in 2019,
Mhm,
and my one of my very close friends, Amanda, who lived here in Atlanta, she used to go to school at SCAD, and she joined me as an intern at my company Go Eat Give, the nonprofit side. She
mhm,
traveled with me to India and all over the world. So she was doing photography and videography for me,
mhm.
but she's originally from Brazil,
Hmm.
and her family is diplomats, so they've lived in a lot of different countries. And then we traveled together for 4 or 5 years. We got to know each other really well,
Mhm,
and I traveled to Brazil with her
mhm.
on one of my trips to Brazil. And that's the story I tell in Beato Goes to Brazil, is the story of Amanda. And Amanda is, this is her personality in the book. This is how she looked like when she was young. She's very athletic and outdoorsy, and she loves food and people and languages. So that's very reflective of her characters.
That's so cool. This actually, you really get to know your characters really when you put them down. So you really are bringing them to life the way they are, actually.
Yeah, the whole idea is to for the kids to actually see another child and how they live right now in another part of the world. So it's not like a fairy tale, it's not something in history.
Mhm.
It's a current observation of another child, and what kind of games do they like to play, what do they religions they follow or the festivals they celebrate, and what the surroundings are like. So I just wanted kids to have a better understanding of each other.
Yeah, that's good. So, um, you also do say that, and this is on your website, suchetarawal.com, that you do not write about anything that is you have not personally visited. Why is that?
I feel like it's a story that you cannot tell. If you have not been there and experienced, it's not a story for you to tell. And a lot of times, I work with PR agents and hotels, destinations, and they're like, why would you write something for us about this? And I'm like, I cannot describe something that I have not felt and I
Mhm,
have not seen with my own eyes based on just photos or what you're telling me. So mm, I'm sure there are other writers who would be a right fit for that.
mhm.
But for me, my style is based on my experience, and I want to create a feeling for you that when you read my story, you feel like you're there and you're having the same experience that I did.
Wow. So you have a Pandora's box of countries to choose from. How do you determine which one is next, and what is your process?
Oh, so I'm going to St. Martin in November, but that's after a very long time, I think since the pandemic, that I'm going on an international trip, which is not Mexico,
Right,
just
right, next
within
door.
the US, or a new country that I have not visited. But that one came about just because they're having this food festival for the first time that I'm interested in. They're featuring a lot of Caribbean chefs.
Mhm,
And a lot of times when I do that, I'll also get to know a lot of chefs and their backstories and feature them in a series of articles. And so it's not just about the destination, but about the people there.
mhm,
But I would love to go back to South Africa.
mhm,
And that's the sixth book I was working on before the pandemic.
mhm.
I had another trip booked last year to go to South Africa and look for my character.
Wow, that's cool. So you are like actually, yeah, that's amazing. And but so I had a thing, and I was reading about your trips around food. I said you should have a COVID edition local. Beato Goes to Buford Highway. That would be a phenomenal one to write. Um, you just don't just write about diverse food and travel, but you have a team that is very diverse. Who are the people who bring Beato to life?
Yeah, so our my illustrators are two ladies in Romania,
Mhm,
and one of them is deaf and mute. since birth. Mine was the first book that she worked on. We found each other online. She was 24 at the time, and
Mhm.
I didn't even know that she had a handicap until I went to Romania and met her in person. But we had been always talking by email, and so that never came up. And her work was amazing. So these two very young women who live in Romania, they do the illustrations and the drawings based on the photographs that I take from my trips. And then my publisher is based in Virginia, and he's from Nepal originally, and he has a company called Mascot Books. And then we have an American editor who works there, and then me.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I was very impressed. Like the whole group is like as diverse as the idea behind the book is. And from my understanding, schools are using your books as a exploratory studies for children about when you go to schools, and this is, I'm sure, before COVID, when you go and you talk, how do the kids react? Like, what do they, when you're talking about a cat going to this place, what happens? What's the magic there?
It is amazing to see the reaction of kids.
Mhm.
And I have been doing a lot of virtual school visits, but it is not the same. Because for one thing, everybody comes and gives me a big hug. And
Oh,
they have a long line of all the students who are waiting to hug me.
oh,
Because
God.
they've never met a real life author before and they're just so excited. But when I read the book and I tell them the story behind the story, and
Mhm.
then I show them photos of where I was and where Beato is, and
Mhm.
that I was in that chopper, and then Beato is in the chopper. And they're
Oh.
like, "Is that you? Is that you?" And then at the end, I show them a photo of the real cat, and
Mhm.
their reaction is like, "Oh, the cat is real!" Yeah, and everybody starts clapping. And these are like 6 year olds. For them, it's just magical.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can assume, I can appreciate that. Children are sponges for information. So when you're writing this book for a very strategic plan, you're not just saying, "Hey, read the book and I'm done." There is a story. You want this to stay beyond, with the family, with the parents. Why?
So I feel like the Beato Goes To books are a way for them to introduce the idea of learning about another culture,
Mhm.
but it's a stepping stone to, say, trying out new foods,
Mhm.
making new friends, or exploring new places.
Mhm.
And a lot of parents have come back to me and said, next time when we were in a grocery store and we passed by the ice cream aisle, my 4-year-old said, there's mochi here. And Beato had mochi when he went to Japan. I want to try it.
Oh.
And so it's like they are interested because the cat did it. Now I want to do it too.
Hmm.
And then there's always a takeaway message too at the end of every book. So in Beato Goes to Israel is about living in harmony across different religions. So when you next time meet your classmate who is a Jewish kid or a Muslim kid, you already have a little bit of background about who they are. And you're less likely to judge, but more likely to show interest,
Mhm.
to learn a little bit more.
Mhm.
And another thing that was happening a lot, probably still is in tiffin boxes, lunch boxes in the US. A lot of times, if you are from a particular culture and you come and open your lunch box, and everybody else is like, well, that looks so weird, or
Yeah.
I would never eat that, or it smells weird. But if you read about it and through the lens of a cat tried it and he loved it, you're like, I want to taste that. Could you share some with me?
Yeah.
So it's just maybe preparing them for the real world where it's a more friendly and a more peaceful atmosphere.
Yeah, you're opening their eyes and opening their perspective of this is another, that's okay to be different, and that I think is a great one. Um, You are actually have an app that's working with the books. Let's hear about that.
Yes, it's an augmented reality and a 3D app that I created for Beato Goes to Greenland, the
Mhm.
first book. So you can download it in the App Store or Google Play, and
Mhm.
it goes along with the book. And you can use the camera feature to make the pages come alive when you have the book, or you can download the full book and you'll see the images moving, and the text has a read to me feature,
Oh.
so even your kid can, if they have an iPad tendency, they can read the book aloud to themselves. They can record their own voice. They can change the colors of the sheep, have pop-out buttons that gives them more education around it. Because kids are more in technology these days, I wanted to see, if that's something that resurrects better with them.
Yeah, no, that's a very cool idea. It's much like interactive book reading. Are any talks to any studios to make this into a television series? Because I think this would be phenomenal on, um, you know, GPB, yes.
I've actually had a lot of conversations with GPB,
Mhm.
but if you know anybody or anybody watching this knows anybody, I have not signed any agreements yet. So I'm definitely open to it.
Okay. Well, we will definitely make sure we talk to you about with people because there are few authors we did know who I have interviewed who did sign up with Disney and stuff and who are. So yeah, we should connect you to them for sure. Do you feel there's a lot of pressure when you're writing and publishing? Now you've published five. Do you have a pressure to constantly produce?
Yes, and I did. So I had a contract with my publisher to do 3 books, and then they did really well. So we had a contract for 3 more books. But then the pandemic happened, so I didn't get the 6th one out last year.
Mhm.
And I'm still waiting for when we can do in-person events, because
Mhm.
a lot of kids specifically,
Mhm.
they are interested in the books when they see the author, or they have a book signing, or they're learning more about the story live. So I don't really want to do an online release.
Yeah.
um, so we're waiting on that. But yeah, there are so, I get like every day whenever I do talk about my book, they're like, oh, you should do a book about this country or that country. And I'm like, I know there are like 260 countries out there, and I'm sure I can do that many books over a few lifetimes.
But then you have to actually find your characters. So that kind of is time consuming to find the right person who fits Beato's personality, really. So,
That plus also, I want to be fair to the country
mhm,
in terms of presenting all of that I want to include in a limited number of pages, because
mhm,
it's a children's book, so we only get 32 pages. And for me to do something like United States or even India,
mhm.
it's so difficult because I cannot put everything I want to put in there. It'll have
Yeah,
to be India 5 series itself.
India has way too much language and diversity in food. I mean, that will throw you off. Um, you say you just talk, you have a charity called Go Eat Give. You established this nonprofit. What was the purpose and how do you want people to support it?
So Go Eat Give is a nonprofit based in Atlanta, and our mission is to raise cultural awareness through food and travel. And the way I do it is by partnering with charities around the world where we support on an ongoing basis, whether it's by sending travelers to that destination where a portion of the trip goes directly to investing in this organization, or we organize events here in Atlanta that are fundraisers
Mhm.
that support that. And before COVID, we were doing a lot of in person events where you could come and try food from that country. We would tie up with different restaurants and consulates and call it destination events, where you learn about that destination, our projects, as well as come and have a live cultural show and food and all that. but now it's mostly around the travel aspect. So instead of going to an Expedia or going to a travel agent, I ask people to come to Go Eat Give, where I can show you a more sustainable way to travel
Mhm.
to that destination, where it's sure you may be paying a little bit more for the package for the trip, but it's totally customized for you and
Mhm.
your family or your friends, whoever you're traveling with, and tailored to your interests, but then also ensuring that whatever you're spending is also helping the community directly.
So, and these charities that you're talking about, the ones you connect to, they all are via Airbnb or something else, like
No,
how?
no, no, that's nothing to do with Airbnb. So I have worked with the women's shelter in Chandigarh, which is
Okay.
the city I'm from.
Mhm.
And we have an orphanage we work with in Amritsar. We work with a village project in outskirts of Delhi, and same thing like in Cuba. We work with the farm. Uh,
Mhm.
there are projects like this all around the world.
Okay.
Right now, even with the Beato Goes to Indonesia book, portion of the proceeds go to a charity I work with in Bali that's called Bali Children's Project.
Mhm.
So these are charities that are already established.
Mhm.
So I don't start any charities, but I become their partners in terms of helping them on an ongoing basis. And I always look for projects that are run by locals, because
Mhm.
I'm not there to come in and say, hey, I'm going to solve this problem for you. I'm going to build something for you. I'm going to come in there and say, what help do you need? And we have, say, travelers coming in. We used to do a lot of group trips before COVID. So we
Mhm.
have 10 people coming to Bali. What can we bring for you that you need? Or while we are here, what kind of programs we can do for you? So they tell me what they need, and that's what we will provide for them.
When you were writing your blog, did you first start writing as a travel blog, or was it food and travel, or just they just went through each other?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both food and travel. And the travel, whenever, because I didn't travel that much back then.
Mhm.
And the food part would be sometimes my own recipes or recipes I've learned from while traveling or shared with me by other chefs. So yeah, it was both from the beginning.
Thank you very much. Any charities you want to give a shout out to, since this is your platform to do so?
Yeah, so if you go on Go Eat Give website, you can see a list of all our partner organizations. And even if you're not traveling with Go Eat Give, if you're going to a destination on your own, I would still encourage you to look through the blog,
Mhm.
because there's over 1,000 posts, and it's organized by country
Mhm.
and by city. So you can look at what's out there, maybe in terms of hotels, restaurants, experiences, or charities that you can directly go visit. And you may be in Mexico for a week and you think that that's a big tourist destination. But even in Mexico City, we worked with kids who are suffering from cancer, and it was their equivalent of a make a wish. And we would bring a toy or something that the kid would write a letter and say this is what we need. And when we would come and meet the parents, the joy we saw with the parents' eyes, that this is maybe my kid's last few days, and you took the time out of your vacation to come here and bring them a toy or a book or whatever they wanted. And that means a lot to them. And that's another way, like you said, we connect as humans. We show each other that we care across different countries and different platforms.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. We are exactly on an hour at this point. And we it was very, very wonderful. And you're doing a great work to help bring cultures together, and with a giving part of it that is very important. Please, thank you very much. Wonderful talking to you, Sucheta. And you can check Sucheta's work pages on her site, www.suchetarawal.com, and follow her on Sucheta Rawal on Twitter. We will be back next month with another conversation with Ritu Bansal. Please reach out via Facebook or email to IACA if you want to be part of the author series. Thank you very much, the IACA's author series team, for another great episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you.